Drug addiction is a disease. It is resistant to treatment, it is subject to relapse, and it can be fatal.
These people are the casualties of this war, and it's not a war on drugs, it's a war on people.
Teaching people how to be people and providing value in their lives. That's what we're supposed to do as a society. And we have utterly failed this, population.
There are co-hosts here, comedian Clayton English and Greg Glod, senior criminal justice fellow at Americans for Prosperity. These guys examine the cost of 5 decades of the policies that we have embraced, the policing that's been done, the persecution of people that, in their view, and one in which I share, are sick. These two really cover a diverse subject matter. They peel back the surface of this complicated period in our history and talk about how the war on drugs has really fueled over-incarceration, has actually exacerbated addiction and come at a very high cost economically. So, Greg, Clayton, welcome to the podcast.
Dr. Phil, thanks for having us, man. It's great to be here.
Thanks for having us, Dr. Phil. Yeah, it's crazy just listening to your voice for so many years now, getting to talk to you about this topic. It's really an honor. So thank you.
Yeah, listen, I've been at this for about 50 years, and I've always said that drug addiction is a disease. It's a serious disease. It is resistant to treatment. It is subject to relapse, and it can be fatal. You are not going to police your way out of this. You're going to treat your way out of this, and it's going to take a multifaceted treatment approach and treatment team. You guys are very critical of the way that this has been approached over the last 50 years. But what I love about the two of you is you don't just criticize what's been done. You have some very constructive ideas and attitudes about what should be done. I hate people that just criticize. I mean, shit, anybody can criticize.
Right.
But you guys don't just criticize. You say, in the alternative, let's consider some other things. So let's talk about this. Clayton, let me start with you. What is your biggest problem with what's been done over the last 50 years?
Oh, man, I think the biggest problem for me is just the lives that have been destroyed. Like, people's lives have been taken apart by this war on drugs, and it's concentrated in certain areas where people are already somewhat at a disadvantage from just the circumstances that they're living in. And the war on drugs has destroyed a lot of Black families, a lot of families, period. But I know in my community, I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it be the reason somebody get pulled over. I've seen it be the reason people get harassed. I see it's the reason somebody has to go sit in jail. They have to put up their house to get this person bailed out. Like, I've seen it unravel people's lives. And I do stand up, and just going around the country, I've been pulled over in every state I've driven in, just about. So, like, you have to start getting creative with how you go get yourself out these situations. Yeah, I smoke weed a little bit, so my thing was I never carry more than I can eat. I'm not going to jail for weed. I'm gonna eat this, right. And yeah. So it's things like that. That's kind of my biggest problem, is just seeing it, tear apart a whole community. And I mean, you saw how crack was treated when it came out. It was a big fear campaign, and you compare that now to what the opioids are doing, and people have a little bit more compassion, and it's a shame that that's what it takes. But I'm glad people are starting to see it is a disease.
It takes some involvement, I think, because a lot of those people that were criticizing addicts in the past are now among them because of this opioid crisis. So all of a sudden they go, hey, this is not so hard to get into. And I've never yet met anybody that told me they started doing drugs because they wanted to become an addict.
Never. Yeah. Yeah. It's not an attractive lifestyle.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a worse place. You're saying how stupid can we be? We could be really stupid on this issue and a lot of other issues. I can't imagine a worse place than jail or prison for someone that is trying to recover from addiction. Clayton brought up the Johan Hari episode that we did, and he talks about this famous study done, an experiment called Rat Park, where essentially you put a rat in a cage and you give him a thing of water with that's just straight water and one with cocaine. and you leave them really no other options where nothing's going on, it's just a cage by themselves, they start going towards the cocaine one, and they eventually will overdose and die. You put them in a position where you build this huge thing, and this guy did this with a bunch of other rats to have sex with and all the food that he wanted, and we exercise wheels and everything else. And after a while, they stop going towards the cocaine water. And it just shows you that addiction definitely has a chemical component to it, but it is that social interaction. And our response to this as a public policy has essentially said, if we throw you in this more desperate situation, you will somehow manage to get out of it. I just don't see the connection there. And so you start thinking about what else is going on here and why do we continue these policies? And I think there's a lot of reasons behind that. But we definitely have not been following the evidence or the science or experts like yourself, Dr. Phil, and others on how to actually treat addiction, something that is really damn impossible to do for a lot of people. And we're using a police response with non-experts leading the way. And we've been doing this for decades now.
You said it in one sentence pretty well. It's a war on people, not a war on drugs. What needs to change? If we're not going to do what we're doing, and clearly what we're doing is not working. Everybody wants to point to the pandemic now because it was a major event, but this was a problem way before the pandemic. We go back to prohibition and all this kind of thing. We're not going to arrest our way out of this. So what should be happening right now? What should we be doing?
So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot from a public policy standpoint to try to kind of right some of the wrongs from the laws that are on the books and the things that we're able to do. Our team works a lot on Capitol Hill and in states to, right now we're working on a bill called the Equal Act, which would, stop the crazy chasm between how we treat crack cocaine compared to powder cocaine, which are essentially pharmacologically, identical, except for crack, the way that you bake it allows it to be a much more pungent punch, cheaper, and shorter lived. And so that was essentially established after, in the 80s, kind of seeing the crack cocaine epidemic. And this is the way that we thought we're going to get out of it. It was a failure. And so to make that a one-to-one and start right-sizing some of those laws, reduce some of the mandatory minimums, allow for judges to see a case and say, the mandatory minimum says you're supposed to go to 10 years, but I think that you would be much better in recovering addiction. So you're going to go to jail for 2. There's all these things that we can kind of start picking at the edges around, limit the ways that law enforcement's able to, do no-knock warrants based upon, a minor drug bust and things like that. There's a lot of those civil liberty aspects of things. But when you're talking about actually winning this drug war overall from a policy standpoint, it is start to take a healthcare approach rather than a criminal justice approach, to allow for experts to lead on this and get people into recovery, through methods that we know work. And so, one thing I do somewhat agree with, but I don't like the way that it's been implemented in practice. It is kind of some of the, medically assisted treatments that we see, that have been effective in places like Europe and Switzerland, where you allow people to come in and utilize, drugs and wean them off in a certain way. But I think that we failed at that as a public policy standpoint, kind of going the other way, and have allowed for open air drug markets to proliferate in places like San Francisco and Philadelphia and Baltimore. And I don't think that's the right way either. We need to find that balance between, actual tough love, and allowing for this and understanding that aspects. But we kind of go one way or the other. We either try to criminalize our way out of it or essentially ignore the problem. And it really is that tough love standpoint where we have carrots, we have sticks. You can't you have to earn your way off of this, but also lead you through a place of empathy and understanding that failure is a part of recovery. That's the one part. You see a lot of things that we try to do from diversion, but the first time they have a dirty urine test, or the first time they miss a meeting, we throw them out on their ass or we throw them in prison. And these are the types of things that fail and what bring people back to relapse. So it's complicated, it's messy, but having that tough love aspect and trying to lead with policy and evidence rather than kind of feel, that's where we need to start at the very least.
Yeah. And let's talk about that for a minute, because I'm well aware of some of the safe zone practices and stuff in some of the Nordic and European countries, and some of those that advocate for that in the United States, and they cite the success levels in Europe to justify doing that here, but they're not doing the same thing here.
Right.
That's just
Exactly.
bullshit. And maybe it's a thin line between enabling and actually keeping people safe. And it has to do with outcome criteria, I guess. If your outcome criteria is we haven't had a single overdose because we got lasers to shoot through here and see if there's fentanyl in here. We have people there to intervene if there is an overdose. And so we haven't had anybody die in our clinic here. Okay, that's true. But we're not trying to get people to use destructive drugs safely. We're trying to get them off of the destructive drugs. And my problem with some of these programs is they don't have a strong enough exit strategy.
Right.
They got a strategy to get them into the safe zone, but they don't have a strong enough exit strategy to get them out into a program that can actually get them off of the drugs.
The goals there are recovery and to move on. And I think the goals here, those are not the same goals. And actually, you kind of look at where a lot of those European countries were prior to trying to bring these types of policies in. They were doing what, San Francisco and other places are doing, essentially just having safe zones and enabling, but it actually didn't get to the underlying root causes until they started getting, more intentional about treating people and weaning them off. The ultimate goal is to have less addiction, to have people recover, to have them thriving jobs, not just to not have someone die here. It kind of reminds me of almost like the parent that everyone knew in high school that allowed everyone to drink at their house. And then it was like, all right, you're safe here for the next 4 hours, but on your way after that, like, it's not really helping. You're enabling a problem instead of actually trying to get to that root cause. So having those interactions between, addiction specialists and doctors and social workers and putting in safe environments, great. But it's kind of like with prisons, like, all right, you have these people here, you have this captivated audience. What's the next step? And we're not doing that next step here. And it's looked at as empathy. And I think it's coming from a lot of the times a good place of empathy to try to help people, but we're really not providing that you need to stop doing the behavior you're doing or else this is only going to get worse. And it's a tough road, but that's what we need to do. We're not doing that.
It's based on the wrong predicate though. Like the parent who says, well, if my child's going to drink, I'd rather him drink here. Well, that's a big if.
Right.
If your aunt had nuts, she'd be your uncle. That's a big if, So you got to say, if my kid's going to drink, are you giving that up if your kid's going to drink at 14? Well, you're saying here in these safe zones, if you're going to do drugs, well, let's not just accept the predicate to that hypothesis there. If you're going to do drugs, well, let's not accept that you're just going to do drugs. What if you don't? What are we offering you as an alternative to that? And the answer is nothing.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying that this behavior is okay and not providing an actual path away from it. And so why wouldn't they drink and drive later on? Essentially, you're getting kind of tacit agreement that this is fine.
If I could do it here,
I can do it anyway. Yeah. Why not? And then you have a lack of a law enforcement approach when they're not doing things. So you are in these open air drug markets and you're doing that, but it's not like there's enforcement beyond these areas to actually help keep places clean. And the thing that they're not doing as well, and a lot of the places like in Switzerland, they're actually providing medical care through providing the methadone or potentially and sometimes, heroin or the actual drug. A lot of the root causes of crime are people trying to keep up with a $200-300 habit. And that's not getting to that. They're bringing their own drugs there to essentially use in a certain way, but they're still having to rob, deal, prostitute, whatever else to get the financial means to get that. And so you're not actually tackling a lot of these underlying problems. You're just kind of giving a safe space for a couple hours, then all the other problems still exist. And I don't see how that's going to be effective long term.
Yeah, and look at it from the family standpoint. I deal with a lot of these families that have a heroin addict in the family, and they'll tell you, look, we don't want them dying under a bridge, but if we let them come home and we go to sleep, they will come in our room. They'll steal everything we own. They'll take our credit cards out of our wallets. They'll take money, jewelry, and go out and turn it into drugs, because we all know if you're seriously addicted, you're going to do whatever it takes to get that next fix because you're trying to avoid being deathly ill.
Yeah.
So what do we tell those families? And they say, well, I'd rather them be in jail than under a bridge. They can't come home. I don't want them under a bridge where they're going to get beaten, raped, robbed, killed, or whatever. If they're in jail, at least I know where they are. Well, I suppose there's something to that, but giving somebody 3 hots and a cot so mom doesn't have to worry is not the objective of incarcerating people.
Right.
A, they're going to do drugs while they're in jail, and B, the minute they get out, they're going right back into the system they were doing drugs with before. So let's be specific. If we're going to spend the next 50 years focused on something, what are the 3 or 4 priorities that the policy needs to focus on for the next 50 years?
I think the biggest thing is to remove the incentives that kind of proliferate the drug war first off when you're talking about kind of just big government and continue to turn the wheels. And so one of the problems that we have right now, and you see this all throughout the drug war, is that there is an incentivization to continue to make these low-level arrests through either grant programs or whatever, or it makes you look good. The more arrests you have, the more prosecutions you get on these. And we go after the lowest common denominator because these are the easiest cases. And so kind of removing some of those incentives away, saying that good policing doesn't look like the amount of arrests you have. Good prosecuting doesn't mean how many convictions you're getting. And so we have to really divorce those things away from each other. So that's one policy standpoint I think we really need to hit on. And then I think a lot of this is taking a lot of the resources and dollars that we're putting in just locking people up and trying to find those alternatives and setting up actual statewide healthcare centers that can come together with law enforcement and actually try to bring people out with checks and balances and incentives and carrots and sticks. And we've seen that being effective in minor little, studies and things like that. But doing that on an expanded level, I think is going to be helpful. And then also kind of implementing some of these things in practice in a correctional facility. One of the things that we've been pushing for is, having some sort of medically, assisted treatment within jails and prisons. And because of the lack of correctional officers, or because of the lack of resources, or really the desire to even do any of this stuff, people try to get off or wean drugs in jail in this horrific setting, when we should be trying to kind of help them bridge that if we're going to have in this carceral area. So I think that's something that we really, really need to start looking on. You've seen a lot of effectiveness in reducing overdose deaths, reducing addiction post-release, if you're able to kind of tackle that problem while they're incarcerated, if we're going to continue to incarcerate people for these types of things. And so those are, I think, the main ones that I'm looking at. And then a lot of it's with social stigma with addiction still. I think there's still propaganda and a villainization of people that utilize drugs. And this is a behavior that we don't want, but that doesn't mean people are evil if they go through that. And so I think we're slowly seeing, Dr. Phil, one of the things that's been actually, a positive of kind of the opioid epidemic and fentanyl epidemic, is that it has been hitting different social areas. It's been hitting rural places. So people that were kind of at a distance from the drug war for a long, long time are now seeing it face to face and understand, well, that's Tommy, our neighbor's kid. He's not a bad kid. He's a screw up here and there, and he messed up here and he's gotten into some stuff. Or I know Bob lost his job, or I lost my job, or I got strung out on opiates, with a busted knee, and now, my doctor's unprescribed. Like, you kind of see it firsthand, and I think that changes people a little bit. And so reducing that stigma, I think will be a major aspect, and we're slowly starting to see that. But those are kind of the biggies from a policy perspective that I could see is much more investment as a healthcare issue than a criminal justice one, and removing those incentives for the criminal justice system to continue to proliferate off this.
Clayton, what do you think people need to hear that are on drugs that's going to get them to be drawn towards some kind of help instead of hide from people that are out there trying to help? What do you think people need to hear that are on the drugs?
Man, that's a tough one. But I think they need to know that it's people that actually care about them. And there's people out there that want to see them a functioning member of society. So, I don't really know where to begin. I think like even I have people in my family, like, you don't know, you want them to get the help. It's like you said, you bring them into your house and they could be good for max maybe 2 weeks before stuff starts turning up missing, and everybody's gonna turn on them, and that's why they're out on the street. That's why they're cast out. But I think that there's people out there that, want to see them do well. But from what I hear, they got to hit that bottom. You know, they gotta hit rock bottom before they even start seeking help, or they gotta get to such a low point that, you know, it's sad that that's the way it is, but that's what I hear. So I think the best thing people can do that aren't on drugs is be there and help guide these people when they're trying to come back into society, and not just look at them like they're the lowest piece of trash.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's trying to show that they have value and that they can provide something, and actually showing that in action. You know, I this always sticks out to me when I visited a prison. There was a guy that was in and out of it. It was either, you know, a string of robberies or larceny, but a lot of it was drugs to kind of keep that habit going. And he finally got enrolled in a class while he was in prison, and he said something, and the instructor, he said like, "Oh, you're really smart." And he's like, "That's the first time I've ever heard anyone say that." And he had been like a model inmate since then. I think he's released at this point, unless something else had happened. But I do think it is that value aspect that people don't see their value once they get into this process, and they're living day in and day out just trying to keep this fix. And so can we provide you with some value, either through family reunification, through maintaining and earning, living accommodations, either through work or treatment and things like that. I think earning those types of things, not only does it kind of bring you out and give you that incentive to stay within this better environment, but it brings pride to you. It brings something like there's nothing more prideful than doing well at your job, being able to buy a house or buy that new car, and like striving for those goals and earning them. You know, you see it all the time with like people that win the lottery. You know, they get millions and millions of dollars, and then they're bankrupt and on their ass like later because they didn't earn it. They didn't actually do that blood, sweat, and tears. Like Clayton, how amazing was it to probably open for Chappelle or win last time? Said when you had done all those hours before, going into shitty comedy clubs across the country, doing opening acts, all that open mic stuff, like to finally like hit that point and peak, that's what matters. Like that, and then you're like, okay, like I've made it. Like, and that means so much more than like, here's your award, or you're playing the Forum tonight, you didn't earn your shit. Like it's a bigger diff. Yeah, it's.
And with you saying that, I think the thing that I would tell people that are addicted is kind of learning from Dr. Phil just now while we've been sitting here is figure out what you want to do. Figure out what you want to do, where you want to be. And it's so many people who have came from addiction that have gone on to be some of the most prolific writers, actors, musicians, all types of, beautiful art has been created from people who, if we just looked at them in one point of their life, would be viewed as an addict. So yeah, find something.
Anytime you start telling somebody, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this, defensiveness goes up really high. But if you approach them like both of you just said it, if you approach them from the standpoint of saying, hey, I love you, I care about you, you deserve better. I want treatment for you, I want help for you because you deserve it. You deserve a better life. You deserve this help. And then the focus has to be on making them feel like they're worthy of receiving that help. I can't tell you how many times I've had addicts sitting on stage with me, and I stop and say, let me ask you something. You're here right now with me on this stage, and you have the undivided attention of my team over the last week and me now and all these people here. How do you feel about that? And you would think they would say, fortunate. I feel like I'm really, and their response invariably is, I don't deserve it.
Right.
I'm not worthy. I'm sitting here with you and there are 10,000 people that want to be in this chair. I'm not worthy of being here. Somebody else should be here instead of me. And somebody else your team should have been working with. And you're offering me this amazing rehabilitation opportunity and all this professional help, and I don't deserve it. It's clear to me that the fundamental threshold you have to cross over is they have to decide, I am worthy of it, and I'm going to live up to that. If we'd spent 50 years helping these disenfranchised, marginalized, no goal, no passion people to feel worthy, that they can require more of themselves and they deserve more of this life, I think we'd be a lot further along than we have been arresting them and locking them up for a half an ounce of this or a half a gram of that. If we'd taken all that time and effort and helped them feel better about who they were, then you treat yourself better.
Yeah.
And we're not doing that.
No, it's exactly right. And, just like any war, to be effective, you have to essentially turn your population through propaganda against this enemy. And that's what we've done, just vilify this population and made them seem like they're lesser than. And that's been by practice. That's not, that's not a flaw in the system. That's been by design so that they're able to increase sentences. So you can do all these things with civil asset forfeiture, where you take people's stuff without convicting them of a crime, where you're able to utilize a no-knock warrant, essentially deprive people of these liberties because of this war, because drug addicts are bad and they're villains. They are the enemy of this war. And we have done that over and over again, rather than saying this is a problem, this is some behavior that we don't want in our society. But the way we get out of this is love, empathy, and value in these people around the other way, just like anything else. I mean, think about, beating your kid, spanking your kid, doing all these things to children, we would not accept. Like, it's not that hard. It's not rocket science to understand. It's not anything different than what you're saying, just how you do parenting or being a teacher, or anything else, just teaching people how to be people and providing value in their lives. That's what we're supposed to do as a society. And we have utterly failed this, population.
Yeah, I see 6 cops go do a marijuana bust, and it's like, really?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, 6 cops. I mean, the guy's going to answer the door and say, "Hey, y'all come in."
Right.
It's like, you need 6 cops, jack boots, coming in, and the guy's going to offer them some ice cream or something. Like, relax.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah.
We talk about the no-knock warrants and how the main reason for them is because they don't want the criminals flushing the drugs. And I'm like, if you got enough drugs that you could just flush it, you didn't have that much drugs. Yeah. Like, you weren't the kingpin. Like,
one of my best friends is Ron White, the comedian.
Oh yeah, he's great.
They arrested him down in Florida. He landed there in his private plane, and they said, "We got a tip that you got drugs." And they searched him, and they said, "Well, I'm sorry, Mr. White, you're going to have to go with us. We found a 1/4 of an ounce of marijuana in your bag over here." He said, "A 1/4 of an ounce? Let me tell you, I got a 1/4 ounce of weed. I consider myself out of weed."
Right. He probably didn't know he had it.
Yeah.
Exactly. He did consider himself out of weed.
Yeah.
They took his ass to jail. He was 2.5 hours late for his show.
Oh,
they were
man.
outside the jail with signs said, "Free the tater."
Come on.
Awesome. Yeah, mission.
That's
Yeah,
great,
let's roll down the
man.
mission accomplished thing for the law enforcement there. Like, yeah, is that what we really want?
Yeah.
Like cops doing? Yeah.
And as a comedian, you just want to make it to your show. And Ron, like you said, he knew that amount was nothing. Like,
that's what he spilled in the bottom of his bag when he was getting out the weed that was going to use. Yeah, exactly. But listen, you guys are so on point about this. And I'm not somebody that says, "Hey, we just need to overlook this." We shouldn't overlook people that are on drugs or addiction, because it ruins their life, and it spreads and it ruins family lives, and children wind up being raised by grandparents. There's a gap with grandparents raising children of drug addicts, and so much is lost and all. But I'm telling you, we are not going to arrest our way out of this. We are not going to incarcerate our way out of this. We've got to have a strategy and a philosophy, and most people get clean on the 7th or 8th attempt, and the failure rate is very high because we need to improve our interventions. We need to improve our treatment, and it all starts with the better somebody feels about themselves, the better they're going to treat themselves, and the less they're willing to settle for. It starts there. I don't know any policymaker, I don't know any policy I've read that is all in on helping these people believe in who they are again and getting them back into society in that way. I hear it talked about, but I don't see it implemented. And if you don't put the funds behind it, you might as well go talk to yourself out in the woods. You guys are drawing attention to this in the right way, and God bless you for doing it.
Well, yeah, that's
Oh
humbling
man,
coming from you,
that means
Dr.
a lot
Phil,
coming
yeah.
from you, man. Appreciate you.
Well, listen, if I can help you guys in any way going forward, I hope you'll let me know, and I hope we can talk about this again. If there are things we can do to draw attention to this, man, I'm in. You just let me know. Put me in, coach, because I think you guys are going at this the right way and doing it with the right spirit. You're not being defensive about people that are on drugs. You're just talking about the realities of what it takes to get this done. I commend you on what you're doing. I'm going to promote your podcast every chance I get. When we're dealing with some of those stories and cases, I'm going to ask you guys to come on and help me deal with some of these families and some of these cases where they understand there are people out there that care.
We'd
That's
love
awesome.
that. And yeah, trust me, I got a laundry list of action items. So let's keep talking. There's some people that you really need to get out and some other items that I think we could really collaborate on. So this won't be the last time you'll hear from me. Yeah, I'll definitely be calling you. Yeah.
Well, same here. I'm proud to know you guys. You're a lot of fun and you talk about things that matter. That's what I love to do. And once again, I'm indebted to Jason Flom. Damn it. Introducing me to the right people on the right issues. So I appreciate it. Guys, thank you for your time. Let's do this again, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Phil. Really appreciate it. This was fun.
Thanks a lot. We'll talk again.
All right.
Take care.
All right, thanks.